TRESPASSIBG. She stepped inside the box, then got what she deserved. Clara had always been curious. She wasn't the type to follow rules just because they existed. And the small town she lived in seemed to have 100 little mysteries tucked away in corners that most people ignored. As a child, she had wandered through forests, explored abandoned playgrounds, and even poked around old buildings that others avoided. She loved the thrill of discovering something new, something hidden, something that not everyone got to see. It wasn't that she was reckless. She just had an unshakable desire to see what was behind the locked doors and warning signs that everyone else respected. It all started one rainy afternoon when she was scrolling through a local online forum. Someone had posted an old photograph of a warehouse on the edge of town, a place that had been abandoned for years. In the picture, the building looked even creepier than she had imagined, with broken windows, rusted walls, and a faded sign that read something like "Private property, keep out." But what caught Clara's attention wasn't the building itself. It was the comment underneath the phone. "They say there's a box inside," it read. "A real old shipping crate still locked. Everyone who went in to see it regrets it." Clara's heart beat a little faster. That was exactly the kind of thing that got her attention. She didn't believe in ghost stories or legends, but she loved the idea of a mystery, a locked box in an abandoned warehouse. The challenge was irresistible. She read the other comments, most of them warning people to stay away. "Dangerous," one said. "Not worth it," another warned. And yet, each warning only made her more determined. There was something about rules being there just to be broken, something that made the story even more tempting. For the next few days, Clara couldn't stop thinking about the warehouse. She drove past it once on her way to work, but the sight of it from the road only made the curiosity stronger. She imagined what could be inside the box. Maybe it was an old safe, filled with forgotten letters or dusty treasures. Maybe it was empty, just a relic of the past, but the thought of finding out for herself thrilled her. Every evening, she researched more about the building's history, trying to find clues about why it had been abandoned or what the mysterious crate might contain. The warehouse had once been part of a small shipping company that closed decades ago, leaving behind only the building and rumors. Some said it had been shut down quickly, leaving boxes and crates inside, forgotten and gathering dust. One evening, as she sat in her small apartment with a cup of tea, Clara decided she couldn't wait any longer. She wanted to see the warehouse for herself, even if it was just from the outside. She packed a small bag with a flashlight, her phone, a notebook, and a bottle of water. She left a note on her kitchen table, telling her roommate where she was going, just in case. Safety first, she told herself. The sun was setting when she arrived at the edge of town. The warehouse looked even more intimidating up close than it had in the pictures. Its metal siding was rusted and flaking, windows broken or covered in grime, and the large sliding doors were sealed tight. A chain with a padlock hung loosely across one corner, swaying slightly in the wind. The air smelled faintly of wet earth and old wood, and the only sound was the distant hum of traffic and the occasional bird flying past. Clara took a deep breath, feeling her excitement mix with a touch of nervousness. She checked the perimeter of the building, noticing the gaps in the fence where the chain link had rusted through. It wasn't difficult to get inside if she wanted to, but she hesitated for a moment. Something about the silence made her pause, the way the shadows seemed to move as the last light of the day faded. But curiosity won. With a determined step, she climbed through the gap, landing lightly on the other side. The warehouse floor was dusty, covered in a thick layer of dirt and fallen leaves. Every step she took made a small crunching sound, echoing in the cavernous space. The air was cooler inside, and it smelled of old wood and metal. Shafts of fading sunlight streamed through the broken windows, casting long, eerie shadows across the floor. Clara shivered, partly from the cool air and partly from the thrill of being somewhere forbidden. She turned on her flashlight, the beam cutting through the darkness. There in the center of the building was the crate. It was larger than she had imagined, about the size of a small closet, made of thick, weathered wood and secured with an old metal latch. Dust covered its surface, and faded letters on the side spelled out a company name she didn't recognize. A sense of anticipation rose in her chest. She circled it slowly, inspecting it from every angle. She could see scratches and marks on the wood, evidence that others had tried and failed to open it. Clara knelt down, brushing the dust from the latch. "What's inside you?" she whispered to herself. The thrill of the unknown sent shivers down her spine. She glanced around the warehouse, half expecting someone to appear and scold her for trespassing. But she was alone, completely alone. The silence was almost complete, broken only by the distant creak of the building settling or a stray beam of sunlight moving across the floor. She touched the latch again, hesitant. A small voice in her head reminded her that she shouldn't, that she was technically trespassing, that she could get hurt or caught. But she pushed the thought aside. This was the adventure she had been waiting for, the story she had imagined in her mind for days. One small click, one small move, and she would know the secret of the box. Clara carefully lifted the latch, her hands trembling slightly. The crate was heavy, but she managed to pry the lid open a few inches. A cloud of dust escaped, making her cough. She stepped back, blinking, and then leaned closer to see inside. The interior was dark, deeper than she had expected, and the light from her flashlight only illuminated a small portion. She couldn't see what was at the bottom. Her imagination raced. Maybe it was an old collection of letters, hidden away by someone long gone. Maybe it was a forgotten treasure from the warehouse's shipping days. The possibilities seemed endless, and the anticipation was almost unbearable. She knelt down again, peering inside, feeling the thrill of discovery pulse through her. For the first time, she felt truly alive in that quiet, abandoned place. The world outside, the rules, the warnings, the ordinary life, didn't exist here. Here, there was only curiosity, mystery, and the chance to discover something no one else had seen in years. She smiled to herself, feeling a connection to the countless others who had probably wondered about the box but had never dared to open it. As she reached out to look further inside, she didn't notice the shadows shifting across the floor, the faint creaking sound of the lid moving behind her, or the way the light from the window flickered across the wood. In her mind, there was only the box and the secret it held. Every cautionary thought seemed distant and unimportant. For Clara, this was the adventure she had been waiting for, the moment where curiosity and courage collided. And so, with a deep breath and a racing heart, she prepared to step closer, unaware that the warehouse had its own way of teaching lessons, and that sometimes curiosity could bring consequences no one expected. Clara hesitated for a moment, her hand hovering over the edge of the crate. The warehouse seemed even quieter than before, as if the building itself was holding its breath, waiting for her next move. Every instinct in her told her to be careful, to step back, to leave the mystery for another day. But excitement won over caution. Her curiosity was a flame that refused to be ignored. She leaned closer, peering into the dark interior, her flashlight cutting through the shadows. The inside of the crate was deeper than she had imagined. At first, she could see nothing but darkness. She moved the flashlight slowly, letting the beam sweep across the walls of the box. It was empty, or at least it seemed empty. The corners were dark, and the wood smelled faintly of old cedar and dust. Her heart pounded as she imagined what could be hidden just out of sight. A feeling of anticipation mixed with a strange nervousness. She was standing on the edge of a discovery, a secret left untouched for decades. Clara's mind raced with possibilities. Maybe there were letters from someone who had worked in the warehouse long ago, carefully folded and stored away. Maybe it was a collection of objects from the old shipping company, items that had never been delivered, forgotten when the business closed. Or maybe it was something completely ordinary, a pile of empty crates stacked for no reason at all. The mystery was more important than the answer. The thrill was in the not knowing. She reached in carefully, her fingers brushing against the rough wood at the bottom of the crate. The wood was smooth in some places, worn by time, and rough in others with splinters that pricked her skin. She leaned closer, trying to see more clearly. Her flashlight caught a glimmer of something shiny. Her breath caught. Could it be metal, glass? She couldn't tell. Her heart raced faster. She wanted to reach in, to pull whatever it was toward her, to finally see the secret that had been hidden for so long. As she stretched her arm deeper into the crate, she realized she had to be careful. The crate was narrower than she expected. She had to bend and twist to reach the bottom. Dust floated up in a small cloud, making her cough and blink. She waved her hand gently to clear the air and tried again. The crate seemed to go deeper than she thought. She felt a strange mixture of excitement and fear. Her imagination was running wild. What if it was something valuable? What if it was something strange or unusual? Clara reminded herself to stay calm. She had explored abandoned places before, but she had never encountered something this mysterious. Her usual thrill-seeking curiosity was mixing with a sense of respect for the unknown. This wasn't just a pile of old boxes or a forgotten storage space. This was something deliberately left behind, something meant to be discovered only by those brave, or perhaps foolish, enough to try. She took a deep breath and leaned over the edge of the crate. She could see the bottom now. There was a small wooden compartment inside, almost like a drawer built into the floor of the box. The craftsmanship was neat, almost delicate. Whoever had built this had cared about what went inside, making sure it was secure and hidden. Clara's curiosity flared even more. She had to see inside that compartment. Clara carefully lifted the small lid of the inner compartment. A soft creaking sound echoed in the empty warehouse, louder than it should have been. She froze for a moment, listening. Nothing moved except for a few dust particles floating in the beam of her flashlight. She shook her head, smiling at her own jumpiness. She was imagining things. The warehouse was empty, silent, and still. She leaned closer again. Inside the compartment were a few old documents and small objects. The papers were yellowed with age, and the ink had faded, but Clara could make out a few words here and there. Names, dates, and addresses, all from long ago. There were also a few small items, a key, a tiny wooden box, and a metal object that looked like part of a tool. Clara picked up each item carefully, examining them one by one. She felt a strange sense of connection to the people who had left these things behind. It was like touching history, holding something that had waited silently for decades to be discovered. Her excitement was almost overwhelming. She could feel her pulse in her ears as she imagined what else might be hidden in the crate. She leaned over the edge again, shining her flashlight into every dark corner. That's when she noticed something she hadn't seen before, a small panel on the side of the crate. It was cleverly hidden, almost blending into the wood. Her heart skipped a beat. Another secret. Another layer of mystery waiting to be uncovered. Clara reached for the panel, running her fingers over the edges. It was smooth and worn, as if it had been touched many times over the years. She pressed gently, and to her surprise, it moved slightly. A small latch clicked and the panel opened. Inside was a tiny, rolled-up piece of paper, tied with a thin string. She carefully untied it and unrolled the paper. It was a handwritten note, old but still legible. The note read, "To the one who finds this, respect what has been left. Some things are hidden for a reason. Curiosity is a gift, but caution is wisdom." Clara paused, reading the words again. They were simple, but they carried weight. Whoever had written this had known that someone might come here one day, and they wanted to leave a message. She smiled softly, feeling a mix of admiration and curiosity. The warning wasn't threatening, but it was clear. The person who left it valued caution and respect for the unknown. She carefully placed the note back in the compartment and closed the panel. Her mind was buzzing. There was still more to explore. She had learned that the crate was more than just a box. It was a carefully designed container with hidden compartments, each holding a secret or a message. The attention to detail fascinated her. Whoever had built this had thought about the future, about the people who might discover it, about how they would react. It was like a puzzle, waiting to be solved. Clara felt a thrill unlike any she had experienced before. She had uncovered something rare and mysterious, something that had survived the passage of time and the neglect of the warehouse. The sense of discovery was intoxicating. She wanted to explore every inch of the crate, to understand every secret it held. But at the same time, the note had reminded her to be careful. There was a fine line between curiosity and recklessness, and she felt herself standing on it. She leaned back, taking a moment to observe the warehouse. The sun had set completely now, leaving only the dim glow of her flashlight and the faint light filtering through the broken windows. The building was silent, empty, and still, yet it felt alive in a strange way. Every shadow seemed to move slightly, every creak of the wood sounded louder than it should. Clara shivered, a mix of excitement and unease running through her. She decided to take a short break, sitting on a nearby wooden crate and resting her arms. She drank some water and tried to calm her racing thoughts. The discovery had been exhilarating, but it had also been exhausting. She realized how much energy she had put into focusing on the crate, how much she had allowed herself to be consumed by curiosity. The warehouse had a way of drawing her in, of making her forget everything else. After a few minutes, she stood up again, determined to continue exploring. She had come this far, and she didn't want to leave until she understood as much as she could about the crate and its secrets. She moved carefully, shining her flashlight into every dark corner, checking for any other hidden compartments or messages. Her mind was alert, her senses heightened. Every sound, every movement, every shadow seemed significant. Hours passed, though Clara hardly noticed. She was completely absorbed in the exploration, discovering small details she hadn't seen before. Scratches on the wood that hinted at past attempts to open compartments, faint markings that might have been notes, and the way the crate seemed almost alive in its complexity. She marveled at the ingenuity of whoever had built it, the care they had taken to create something that would survive and fascinate decades later. As the night deepened, Clara realized that she had learned more than she had expected. The crate wasn't just a physical object. It was a story, a puzzle, and a lesson all in one. It was a reminder that curiosity could lead to discovery, but that respect and caution were equally important. She felt a deep appreciation for the person who had hidden these secrets, for the thought and care that had gone into every detail. Finally, as she prepared to step back and rest, Clara felt a sense of accomplishment. She had explored the crate thoroughly, discovered its hidden messages, and experienced the thrill of uncovering something long forgotten. She knew that the warehouse and its mysterious crate would stay with her, a memory of curiosity, discovery, and the delicate balance between excitement and caution. Clara had been in the warehouse for hours now. Her excitement was still high, but a quiet unease had started to creep in. The longer she stayed inside the abandoned building, the more aware she became of just how empty and isolated it was. The walls seemed to close in around her, shadows stretching and shifting as her flashlight flickered across the cracked concrete floor. The thrill of discovery was still there, but now it was tinged with a subtle sense of vulnerability. She realized she had entered a space that was meant to be private, left alone for decades, and the weight of that realization made her pause. She glanced back at the crate. Its hidden compartments and carefully placed messages had fascinated her, and for a moment she felt a sense of triumph. But that feeling was fleeting. Clara had been so focused on exploring the secrets of the crate that she hadn't noticed how dark it had become outside. The sun had completely disappeared, leaving only the faint glow of her flashlight and the small patches of moonlight filtering through broken windows. The warehouse felt larger, emptier, and stranger in the shadows. Every sound, the creak of the wooden crate, the soft whistle of the wind through a broken window, even the distant hum of traffic, seemed amplified in the silence. She took a deep breath and tried to calm herself. "It's just an empty warehouse," she whispered aloud. "Nothing here can hurt me." But even as she said it, she felt the echo of her own voice bounce off the walls, creating strange, shifting noises that made her startle. Clara realized that part of the thrill she loved about exploring had always been the risk, the uncertainty of what she might find. But now, that risk felt real and immediate. She had crossed a boundary, stepped into a space that didn't belong to her, and the consequences of that decision were beginning to make themselves felt. Clara moved closer to the crate again, her flashlight tracing the lines of its weathered wood. She wanted to examine it one last time before leaving, to make sure she hadn't missed any hidden compartments or messages. Her fingers ran over the smooth surfaces, brushing away dust and tiny bits of debris. The crate seemed almost alive in its complexity, every panel and edge designed to challenge whoever dared to explore it. The thrill of uncovering its secrets was addictive, and Clara found herself leaning closer, drawn back into the puzzle she had spent hours unraveling. As she inspected the crate, Clara noticed a small gap between the lid and the sides. She hadn't seen it before, and curiosity immediately sparked inside her. She carefully pushed the lid, testing to see if there was more to discover. To her surprise, the lid shifted slightly, making a soft scraping sound against the wood. Her heart jumped. Was there another compartment? Another secret waiting to be revealed? She hesitated for a moment, remembering the note she had found earlier. Curiosity is a gift, but caution is wisdom. Shaking her head, Clara reminded herself to be careful. She had already learned so much, and she didn't want to get carried away. But the temptation was too strong. She pressed the lid a little more firmly, and it began to give way. Dust rose in a small cloud, making her cough. Her flashlight beam caught something shiny inside, and she leaned closer to get a better look. It was a small metal object, smooth and cool to the touch, partially hidden beneath an old cloth. Clara's excitement surged again. She had found something new, something that hadn't been discovered yet. She lifted the object carefully, examining it under her flashlight. It was a small, delicate item, worn with age but clearly crafted with care. Clara turned it over in her hands, studying its shape and texture. She couldn't tell exactly what it was, but it seemed important, as if it had been intentionally placed here to be found by someone observant enough to notice. The realization made her pulse quicken. She felt like she was holding a piece of history, a tiny link to the people who had left it behind. For a moment, Clara lost herself in the thrill of discovery. She examined every corner of the crate, checking for more hidden objects or messages. Her mind raced with possibilities. Each small detail felt significant, every shadow and creak in the warehouse adding to the sense of mystery. She was completely absorbed, forgetting the passage of time and the outside world. The warehouse had become a place outside of reality, a stage where curiosity and imagination took over. But as she leaned over to look deeper into the crate, Clara realized something unsettling. The floor beneath her feet felt slightly unstable, and the beam of her flashlight revealed small cracks and weak patches in the wood and concrete. For the first time, she became aware of the physical risks of being in the warehouse. She was so focused on the crate that she hadn't noticed the decay around her. The building was old, abandoned, and fragile, and her presence might be enough to disturb it. Clara straightened up, taking a step back to survey her surroundings. The shadows seemed to grow longer, stretching toward her as if reaching from the corners of the warehouse. The air felt heavier, cooler, and she could hear faint noises she hadn't noticed before. The soft scratching of something moving far away, the distant drip of water, the subtle creak of a door swaying in the wind. Her excitement was mixed now with a sense of caution. She realized that the warehouse wasn't just a static space. It was a place that changed as she moved through it, reacting in small ways to her presence. She shook her head again, trying to clear her thoughts. She wasn't afraid, at least not yet, but she knew she needed to pay attention. The note's warning echoed in her mind. Curiosity was a gift, yes, but it could also lead to consequences if she wasn't careful. Clara reminded herself to stay calm and methodical. She decided to finish her exploration of the crate and then leave, taking with her the knowledge and small objects she had discovered. As she leaned closer to examine one of the hidden compartments again, she heard a soft noise behind her, a sound that didn't belong to the crate or the warehouse itself. Her head snapped up, flashlight beams swinging to the dark corners of the room. There was nothing there, just shadows and empty space. She told herself it was the wind, the building settling, anything but someone else. But the sound had startled her, making her heart race. She felt a strange awareness of being completely alone in a large, empty space. Clara took a few steps away from the crate, trying to calm herself. She focused on her breathing, inhaling slowly and exhaling even more slowly. She reminded herself that she was in control, that she knew the warehouse better than anyone else at that moment. The noises she heard were harmless, part of the building's character, part of the thrill she had sought. And yet, a small voice in the back of her mind urged caution. The crate had more to it than she initially realized, and the warehouse was a place where curiosity needed to be tempered with respect. Determined to remain focused, Clara returned to the crate, examining the final compartments and making mental notes of everything she had discovered. The objects she had found, the hidden panels, the old documents, they all told a story of care, attention, and intention. Someone had built this crate to hold secrets, to challenge those who found it, to reward careful observation. Clara felt a deep respect for the creator, imagining the thought and effort that had gone into crafting something so intricate and deliberate. But the warehouse was changing around her, even if only in her perception. Shadows shifted, sounds echoed differently, and the air felt colder. Clara realized that she had been so absorbed in her exploration that she had lost track of time. The night had grown darker, and the warehouse seemed almost alive in the silence. Her excitement remained, but it was now tempered by awareness, a growing sense that the warehouse had more to teach her, and that she needed to pay attention. She decided it was time to leave the crate and explore the rest of the warehouse briefly, just to satisfy her curiosity before heading home. She moved carefully, flashlight beams sweeping across the floor and walls. Every corner held potential for discovery, every shadow seemed significant. She was alert, focused, and respectful of the space, aware that she was a visitor in a place that had its own history and rules. As she explored, Clara found small details she had missed before. Faded footprints, old markings on the walls, remnants of objects left behind. Each discovery added to her understanding of the warehouse and its past, and she felt a sense of connection to the people who had once worked and lived nearby. The warehouse wasn't just a building, it was a story, a memory, a place that had survived the passage of time to offer lessons to those willing to pay attention. Finally, Clara returned to the crate one last time. She looked down into its depths, remembering everything she had found and learned. The note, the hidden compartments, the small objects, they were all part of a carefully constructed puzzle. She felt a sense of completion, of having done what she came to do. At the same time, she knew that the warehouse and the crate had more to offer, but that it was time to step away, to leave some mysteries undisturbed. With a deep breath, Clara carefully closed the crate, making sure the hidden compartments were secure and the objects remained undisturbed. She stepped back, taking in the warehouse one last time. The shadows, the echoes, the quiet hum of the night, all of it felt meaningful, as if the building itself acknowledged her presence and her respect. Clara realized that curiosity was a gift, but wisdom lay in knowing when to stop. As she prepared to leave, she took one last look at the crate. She felt a mix of triumph and humility, triumph at having discovered its secrets, humility at having been reminded that curiosity needed boundaries. She turned toward the exit, flashlight in hand, ready to step back into the world outside, carrying with her the thrill of discovery and the lessons of the warehouse. Clara had felt a sense of satisfaction when she stepped away from the crate, the discoveries she had made still fresh in her mind. She thought about leaving the warehouse entirely, carrying the excitement of her adventure with her as a secret story she could replay over and over. But the warehouse was not done with her yet. As she took a few steps toward the exit, the shadows around her seemed to shift in ways she hadn't noticed before. A faint draft carried the scent of old wood and dust deeper into her senses, and the echo of her footsteps bounced differently across the vast, empty space. She stopped for a moment, realizing how alone she really was. Out here, on the edge of town, no one could hear her if she called out. The thrill of exploration had been intoxicating, but now it was mingled with a quiet awareness of her vulnerability. Clara remembered the note she had found earlier, the one that said, "Curiosity is a gift, but caution is wisdom." At the time, she had thought of it as a gentle warning, something to respect but not to fear. Now, she felt the weight of those words in a very real way. Clara took a cautious step toward the door. Her flashlight flickered slightly, making the shadows jump and twist across the walls. She shook it gently, and the light steadied, but her heartbeat had already quickened. The warehouse was silent except for the small sounds of her own movement, yet everything seemed amplified. The creak of the wooden floor, the faint drip of water somewhere far off, the rustle of a rat perhaps, or just the wind sneaking through broken windows. Every small sound made her glance over her shoulder, her imagination filling in the gaps with possibilities she didn't want to think about. As she moved further, she realized that her sense of direction was less certain than she expected. The warehouse was larger than she had first realized, and her focus on the crate had caused her to ignore the twisting corridors and side rooms. Each step now required more attention. She carefully scanned the walls and the floor, making sure she didn't trip over loose boards or forgotten debris. The thrill of exploration that had once energized her now required careful attention to avoid mistakes. Suddenly, she noticed something she hadn't before, a faint light in one of the side rooms. It wasn't the glow of her flashlight. It was a small, pale reflection, like moonlight hitting a piece of glass. Her curiosity flared again. She had already learned the lessons of caution, but the pull to investigate something unknown was strong. With careful steps, she moved toward the side room, flashlight in front of her, ears tuned for any unusual sound. The room was small and dusty, filled with empty shelves and forgotten boxes. The faint reflection came from a cracked window, moonlight bouncing off a fragment of glass on the floor. Clara crouched to examine it, careful not to disturb anything else. The fragment wasn't important by itself, but it made her notice more of the small details she had overlooked before. Footprints in the dust, tiny scratches on the shelves, the way the old wooden floor creaked in certain places. Each small detail reminded her that the warehouse had a long history, and she was now a part of it, even if only briefly. As she explored the room, Clara realized that time had passed faster than she thought. The shadows outside had grown longer, and the cool night air had begun to creep through the broken windows, brushing against her arms. She felt a shiver of both excitement and nervousness. The warehouse, which had seemed like a safe playground of mystery during the day, now felt like a vast, complex space that demanded respect. Every creak, every whisper of wind, every tiny movement made her alert and cautious. Clara returned to the main area, her flashlight sweeping across the large, empty floor. She thought again about the crate and the objects she had discovered. The thrill of finding the hidden compartments had been exhilarating, but now she felt a growing sense of responsibility. She had learned something that few others would ever see, and she understood that her choices had consequences. Being curious was one thing, staying in a place without preparation or awareness was another. As she walked, her foot brushed against something hard. She looked down and saw a small metal object, perhaps part of the crate's hidden mechanisms. She picked it up carefully, turning it over in her hands. It wasn't dangerous, but it reminded her that even small actions in this warehouse could have effects she hadn't considered. Clara realized that her earlier excitement had made her overlook the physical reality of the space, the fragile floors, the rusted metal, the sharp edges hidden under layers of dust. Every step needed thought now. Her mind wandered briefly to the people who had built the crate, who had hidden the messages and the objects. They had thought about the future, about how someone like her might explore their creation. They had left guidance, hints, and warnings, expecting that the curious would find them. Clara felt a connection to those unknown people across time. Their foresight and care impressed her, and she felt a deep respect for the thoughtfulness behind the crate. Suddenly, a soft sound made her freeze. It was faint, almost like the whisper of air moving through a small crack in the wall, but Clara's imagination immediately added weight to it. Her pulse quickened. The warehouse, once a place of adventure, now felt like a puzzle full of surprises, some of which could catch her off guard. She reminded herself to stay calm, to move carefully, and to pay attention to her surroundings. Every sound, every shadow, every object in the room could tell her something about the space if she looked closely. She moved toward the exit, flashlight sweeping the floor ahead. Her heart pounded with a mix of lingering excitement and caution. The air outside the crate had cooled her, but she realized that the real challenge wasn't the cold. It was staying aware of the environment and her own actions. Each step needed to be deliberate. Clara thought about the note once more. Curiosity is a gift, but caution is wisdom. The words felt heavier now, more urgent, as if the warehouse itself had been waiting to remind her. As she approached the exit, Clara's foot slipped on a loose board. She caught herself just in time, feeling her heartbeat spike. The crate, the shadows, the objects she had found, they had all drawn her attention, leaving her less aware of the simple physical risks around her. She took a deep breath, steadying herself, and reminded herself to focus. She was learning that exploration was not just about thrill, it was about awareness, respect, and careful observation. Clara paused near the warehouse door, looking back at the crate. It seemed smaller now, less mysterious, yet still holding secrets she might never fully understand. She realized that her curiosity had been both a gift and a lesson. She had experienced something rare and wonderful, but she had also learned that every choice had consequences, and that even a seemingly simple act of exploration could teach humility and responsibility. She opened the door and stepped into the cool night air. The warehouse loomed behind her, silent and still, a place that had offered both adventure and reflection. Clara took a moment to breathe, feeling the tension and excitement drain from her body. She realized that her adventure had changed her in subtle ways. She was more aware, more thoughtful, and more respectful of boundaries and spaces that were not meant to be casually explored. As she walked back toward the edge of town, Clara reflected on the night's events. The crate had been more than a box of hidden objects. It had been a teacher, a puzzle, and a mirror for her own curiosity. She understood now that true exploration required not only courage and curiosity, but also mindfulness and patience. The warehouse had reminded her that adventure was not just about discovery. It was about responsibility and learning from every choice she made. By the time Clara reached the main road, the stars were twinkling in the night sky, and the distant hum of traffic felt comforting. She looked back toward the warehouse one last time. Its silhouette was dark against the horizon, filled with shadows and mysteries. She knew she would never forget this night, the crate, or the lessons she had learned. Her curiosity had led her to something extraordinary, but it had also taught her the importance of balance. Excitement tempered with caution, adventure paired with respect. Clara walked home slowly, savoring the quiet night and the sense of accomplishment that came from exploring something hidden, mysterious, and meaningful. She carried the small objects and notes carefully in her bag, each one a tangible reminder of her adventure and the lessons embedded in the crate. As she approached her apartment, she realized that curiosity was a journey, one that required both courage and wisdom, and one that would continue to shape her choices in the future. The warehouse, the crate, and the discoveries she had made that night would always remain vivid in her memory. She had stepped into a space that had been abandoned for decades and had emerged not only with treasures to examine but with a deeper understanding of herself. The night had been both thrilling and humbling, and Clara knew she would carry its lessons with her forever. Clara thought she had learned all the lessons the warehouse had to teach her. She had explored the crate, discovered its hidden compartments, reflected on her own curiosity, and experienced the thrill of finding something long forgotten. But as she made her way back toward the edge of the warehouse, she realized that the night was far from over. The shadows seemed deeper now, and the silence of the building was almost tangible. Every step she took echoed louder than expected, as if the warehouse were aware of her movements and watching her leave. She paused at the threshold of the main door, her hand on the rusted handle. The cool night air brushed against her face, carrying the scent of damp earth and old wood. For a moment, she considered stepping out and leaving the warehouse behind entirely. But curiosity, the very force that had drawn her here, stirred once again. She glanced back at the crate, its dark wooden surface catching the faint moonlight. Something in her mind urged her to take one last look, to make sure she hadn't missed any final secret, any hidden message left for her to find. Clara's flashlight danced across the warehouse floor as she returned to the crate. Each shadow seemed to stretch longer than before, creating shapes that weren't there. Her heart raced, not from fear, but from the anticipation of uncovering one final mystery. The crate stood as it had all night, silent and patient, as if it had been waiting for her to make one last choice. She knelt before it, brushing her hand over the wood and dust, and wondered what else might be hidden inside. Her fingers traced the edges of the compartments she had already explored. The hidden panels, the small objects, and the rolled-up note had all been fascinating, but there was one area she hadn't examined closely, the very bottom of the crate, beneath a thick layer of dust and old cloth. With careful movements, she shifted the covering aside, revealing a shallow recess. It was empty except for a small envelope, yellowed and fragile with age. Clara's pulse quickened. She lifted it gently, feeling the fragility of the paper in her hands. The envelope had no name or address, just a simple inscription in faded ink, "For the one who seeks the truth." Clara carefully opened it, unfolding the letter inside. The handwriting was neat and deliberate, the words clear despite the years. To whoever finds this, know that curiosity is a gift, but understanding comes from patience and observation. Every choice carries weight, and every action leaves an impression. You have seen what was hidden, but remember that some secrets are meant to guide, not to satisfy desire alone. Respect the space you enter, and carry the lessons you learn beyond these walls. Clara's hands trembled slightly as she read. She felt a profound connection to the person who had written the note. It was as if they had anticipated her arrival decades ago, understanding that someone like her would come, eager to explore and discover. The letter wasn't a warning in the sense of danger. It was a gentle reminder that every act of curiosity should be paired with respect and thoughtfulness. She carefully folded the letter and placed it back in the envelope, feeling as though she was holding a small piece of wisdom passed through time. She sat back on her heels, taking a moment to reflect. The warehouse, the crate, and the objects she had discovered were more than just curiosities. They were teachers. Clara realized that her adventure had not only revealed hidden compartments and messages, but had also revealed something about herself. Her eagerness to explore, her willingness to take risks, and her ability to notice small details had all served her well. Yet, the warehouse had also reminded her that curiosity needed boundaries and awareness. The sound of the wind outside grew stronger, making the broken windows rattle softly. Clara looked around the warehouse one last time, her flashlight sweeping across the shelves, crates, and shadows. She noticed small details she hadn't before. Faint markings on the walls that seemed almost like instructions, tiny scratches in the floor where others might have tried to uncover the crate's secrets, and the way the moonlight danced across the dust particles in the air. Every detail added to her understanding of the space and its history. Clara stood up slowly, brushing the dust from her clothes. She realized that staying any longer could lead to mistakes, missteps in the dark, tripping over debris, or simply getting lost in the labyrinth of the warehouse. Respecting the space meant knowing when to leave, and she knew that the time had come. She took a final look at the crate, feeling a mixture of gratitude and awe. It had been a source of adventure, mystery, and learning, and it would continue to hold secrets for those who came after her. As she moved toward the exit, Clara noticed the floorboards shifting slightly beneath her weight. She adjusted her steps, careful not to disturb anything unnecessarily. The warehouse seemed to acknowledge her respect, as if the very act of leaving carefully was part of the lesson it wanted to teach. She felt a sense of calm and accomplishment, a satisfaction that came from understanding the balance between curiosity and caution. Stepping outside, the cool night air felt refreshing. Clara took a deep breath, filling her lungs with the crisp scent of the evening. The warehouse loomed behind her, silent and still, its mysteries intact. She glanced back one more time, knowing that she had experienced something rare. The adventure had been real, tangible, and meaningful, and it had left a lasting impression on her. Walking back toward the edge of town, Clara reflected on the lessons of the night. Curiosity had driven her to the warehouse, but it was patience, observation, and respect that had allowed her to fully appreciate the experience. She realized that every object, every note, every hidden compartment in the crate had been carefully placed to guide the explorer, not to punish them, but to teach them. The lesson was clear. Discovery was not just about what was found, but how one approached it. As she reached the streetlights marking the edge of the town, Clara felt a sense of closure. The warehouse would remain behind her, a place of secrets and history, waiting for the next curious soul to enter. She knew she would never forget this night, the crate, or the lessons she had learned. The experience had shaped her understanding of curiosity, caution, and respect in ways that would influence every adventure she undertook in the future. When she finally reached her apartment, Clara carefully placed the small objects she had collected from the crate on a table. She examined each one, noting the craftsmanship, the details, and the history embedded in them. Every item told a story, and she felt honored to have been part of that story, even for a brief moment. The envelope with the note was carefully preserved, a tangible reminder of the wisdom passed down through time. Clara sat quietly for a long time, reflecting on the night's adventure. She realized that she had experienced something extraordinary, not just the thrill of exploration, but the understanding that every action carries meaning. The warehouse had taught her that curiosity was a gift, but wisdom was required to use it responsibly. She felt a profound sense of gratitude for the experience and for the invisible hand that had guided her through the mystery of the crate. Over the next few days, Clara found herself thinking about the warehouse constantly. The images of shadows, dust particles in moonlight, and hidden compartments stayed in her mind. But instead of feeling restless or unsettled, she felt inspired. The adventure had taught her to notice small details, to respect boundaries, and to approach the unknown with care. She realized that these lessons applied not just to abandoned warehouses, but to life itself. Curiosity and caution, adventure and mindfulness, they were all intertwined, and she now understood how important it was to balance them. Clara shared the story of her adventure with a close friend, carefully avoiding any mention of danger or trespassing. She focused on the lessons, the discoveries, and the sense of wonder she had experienced. Her friend listened in awe, amazed by the depth of her observations and the clarity of her reflections. Clara realized that part of the value of her experience was being able to articulate it, to convey not just the thrill of exploration, but the wisdom it had imparted. In the weeks that followed, Clara continued to think about the crate and the warehouse. She knew she would never return, not because she wasn't curious, but because she had learned that some mysteries were best appreciated from a distance, once they had been explored responsibly. She had experienced the adventure fully, and now she could carry its lessons with her, sharing them and applying them in new situations without needing to repeat the same risks. The warehouse, the crate, and the small objects she had discovered remained vivid in her memory. She would always remember the quiet thrill of discovery, the careful observation of hidden details, and the lessons passed down through the handwritten note. Clara understood that the night had been more than an adventure. It had been a journey of personal growth, teaching her about responsibility, awareness, and the delicate balance between curiosity and caution. As she went about her daily life, Clara found herself noticing small details she had once overlooked, appreciating subtle hints and quiet moments with a newfound attentiveness. The experience at the warehouse had changed her perspective, reminding her that even the smallest choices could carry meaning. Curiosity remained a gift, but she now understood that wisdom and respect were the keys to unlocking its full potential. And so, the night of the warehouse and the crate became a memory that Clara cherished deeply. It was a story of discovery, reflection, and growth, a reminder that adventure and learning often go hand in hand, and that the lessons we find along the way are sometimes the greatest treasures of all.